Hey, wonderful news. I just got the Time Magazine 100 Most Influential People issue, and I am happy to report I'm not on that list. Okay, folks, I am finally back at home after another 5-week road trip. I've driven 12,000 miles since July 11th. Yes, my carbon footprint is basically the size of Sasquatch, but I am planning to remedy that to some degree with a possible bike purchase coming up, which I will share at a later date. But before I dive into this Q&A, which is all over the place, I've got an iPad here, I've got my computer here, I've got questions on all kinds of things, and I just didn't get it together enough to put them in one document, which is what I should have done, but I didn't, so there we are, and I can't do anything about it now. So, before we go any further, do you ever daydream about yourself? Be honest. My guess is you do. And when I say daydream, think about Walter Mitty, like that kind of daydreaming, which, by the way, if you haven't seen that movie, it's fantastic. The Secret Life of Walter Mitty. I think most of us do, right? We're the superstar in our dream. We're the hero. We are saying something incredible or doing something incredible. We are saving the day, and we are the hero. I finally figured out basically what life is about. And that is trying to be that person in real life. And it doesn't take that much to go from where most of us are to being that person. And I think what we do as humans is we put artificial barriers in front of ourselves that make it more difficult for us to be those people. Politics, religion, those kind of things. There's nothing wrong with politics. There's nothing wrong with religion. But I think sometimes what we need to do is just rearrange the hierarchy and the pecking order. And I think putting humanity at the top and everything else below is the quickest way for all of us to become that person that we daydream about. So that's my first point. That was not a question in any way, shape, or form. That was kind of a weird statement, if you will. But I was thinking about it driving home today, putting 12,001 miles on the van, and I thought, man, I just wish more of us were the people that we see ourselves as in our brain. So great questions this week. Appreciate everyone who has sent these things in. And I'm one person with one opinion, and we've gone over that many times. That has not changed. And I was a solid C student, so take it for what you will. Today's going to be about Lyme disease, it's going to be about life, and it's going to be about photography and books and all the things that you would normally expect to see and hear on my channel. The first question, which actually I think 2 people asked this, and I'm hoping to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Hello, Dan. This is question number 1. Here's a little question for your next Q&A. You mentioned the combination of stills and audio as your preferred combination. Yes, if left to my own devices, I really like that. Do you have any suggestions on how to work this in an exhibition? That's a really good question. Here's the thing about me and exhibitions at this point in my life. Believe it or not, I very rarely ever go to photo galleries anymore, and I hardly ever go to art museums anymore. I know that might surprise you. I don't have anything against photo galleries and art museums. I don't, and I will go again. I much prefer natural history museums. That's sort of the theme of where my life would be going right now if I had to pick one or the other. But photo exhibitions, for the most part, to me, many of them fall into a very predictable category. And imagine linear, documentary, classic photography. But imagine putting a layer of conceptual art on top of it. I actually think that is a really wise way to think about your exhibition. With sound and stills in particular, I like to, when I'm exhibiting stuff, I like to give multiple versions of the exhibition, multiple flavors of ways that people can connect with the work. For example, you may have a small room of part of the exhibition that's just stills on the wall, maybe a single best image that you have in a room by itself, where there is nothing else to distract the person from seeing what you want them to see. Secondarily, when you add sound in, sound works really well with those still images as motion. So you could have another room of the exhibition that is, exposure just changed dramatically. That's weird. Anyway, have a film playing, have still images alone, and then have a room potentially of just sound, periodically interrupted with images projected on the wall. I think forcing people to allow to hear what's around them on a daily basis that their brain has taken for granted is a very interesting play on words, if you will, play on sound, if you will. So there's so much noise in the world, certain countries more so than others, but we often take it for granted because we've heard it so much that our brains block it out. And then when you record it, and people who are maybe even potentially at the scene with you will often say, wow, I was there and I don't remember hearing that. So my short piece of advice would be to give multiple options with the same body of work. Stills, maybe a film playing, and then potentially a combination of the two. Good question. All right, this next question is long, but it's from someone I've known online on and off now. Not on and off, I guess I should say consistently, but it's not like we hang out all the time. He lives way far away. He lives in Asia, which I think is it's somewhere near Canada, if I'm not mistaken. And so this is a long thing I need to read, and then we're going to do this. This is question 2. As you may or may not know, I tried to become a professional photographer years ago, trying all kinds of genres, looking for something I liked. Let's remember that sentence. Tried several genres. But like many others, I guess I was sold an unrealistic dream by the camera companies. Yes, they will. Camera companies and the online photo community can be two organizations or entities that will definitely sell you a bill of goods about what being a photographer is about. Oftentimes, it's completely unrealistic and kind of cruel in some ways. One day I realized how ridiculous it all was, sold everything, bought a Leica at one lens, and shot film for years, keeping it as simple as possible. Smog Ranch influence. That was my original website, by the way, Smog Ranch. I traveled, took snapshots, and tried to make it all more interesting by putting myself in interesting places. India's Kumbh Mela, Japanese festivals, Cambodia, etc. I remember this is when I first met this person, basically online, and I saw his work, and I'm like, this is really good. But every now and then I get pangs and regret about giving up. Whether I was actually good enough is a separate issue. But the more I hear you talk, the more I believe I made the right decision. I make good money doing something else. Good money. Headquarters. Let's take him back to headquarters. My photography projects today are other things in which I take a camera along. Hiking in a specific mountain range, walking an ancient trade route, trying to photograph with this sense of adventure and curiosity, just like I did back in the 90s, backpacking around the world. Oh yeah, heaven. I also want to leave behind a personal archive for my daughter so that she can know what I was up to before she was born. It's a good idea. Commendable. My question, was it okay to give up, and how do you deal with occasional pangs of regret, if you have them? I sometimes think I failed and want to seriously work again, but also know that would be ridiculous in this day and age when shooting for myself casually is so much fun. I'm going to go back. So that was the end of the question. That was question 2. I tried to become a professional photographer years ago, trying all kinds of genres, looking for something I liked. That, my friend, is the first red flag for me. Most of the time, I think, and I'm sure that there are exceptions and I could be wrong about this. This is my experience. Most of the time, the people that I know that are very successful photographers knew their genre from a mile out. They knew it from the time that they picked up a camera and said, this is who I'm going to be and what I'm going to do. There was very little searching for a genre that they may like and may fit into. So that to me is an indicator that you made the right decision. I think if you were 18 years old, traveling the world with a backpack, and you were like, I am going to do this for a living and I'm going to be a reportage photographer, then I would say, okay, I would still tell you made the right decision. But that's a little bit of a red flag, the not knowing what genre. I never have pangs of leaving professional photography. In fact, I would never, ever, ever return for any reason. So I not only don't have pangs, I am going 100 miles an hour in the other direction. I love my life a lot more now than I did when I was working as a full-time photographer. I did it for a long time, but I'm also maybe not necessarily my philosophy about this is not typical. Also, I changed up what I was doing every 5 years as a photographer. So if I was still doing what I was doing, if I was still a newspaper photographer 30 years later, I would have lost my mind. I would not have I would have hated photography. It just wasn't it was my thing until it wasn't my thing. And then portraiture was my thing until it wasn't my thing. I purposely mixed it up to keep challenging myself, and just because that matches my personality. But when someone asks me what kind of photographer I truly am, I'm a long-form black and white reportage guy. That's my thing. I love long-term projects. I love black and white work for the most part, and that's what I want to do, and that is who I am, but I didn't necessarily do that for a living. I don't think you should sweat or feel like a failure. I think the work that you are making now, documenting the world for your daughter, is far more important than anything you would do as a professional photographer. And to try to get that assigned from someone is, I mean, I'm not saying it's impossible. It would just be drudgery trying to get someone on board with that. One of the reasons that I left was that so many of the people I was working for didn't know what good photography was. They didn't want it when they saw it. They were just copying something that they had seen done before. And social media just turned all these people inside out. They just didn't know what to do. I still see the same thing today. I see people doing social because they feel like they don't have a choice. And the work is often never even discussed. It's just basically not a fun situation to be in. So I don't think you made a bad decision, my friend. I think you made a good decision. Okay, now, if you saw this document I'm trying to read these questions off of, you would be like, you straight tripping, man. So this is question numero tres. We know you love books and magazines. Yes, it's true. I've admitted to that many, many times. But what other printing medium do you like? Do you make large prints of your work? The short answer is, I like any and all print. I like postcards, little 4x6 postcards. I like 3.5x5 individual prints. I love every other kind of size of print, 5, 7, 8, 10. I'll even do digi-sizes, 11, 17, 16 by 19, or whatever. No, 19 by 13 by 19. Yeah, that's the digi-size. 11, 14, whatever, 16 by 20. That's probably my all-time favorite black and white analog print size. Yes, I print anything and everything any chance I get. Not to mention, I do all kinds of weird little works on paper that have nothing to do with photography. I typically don't show them to anyone because they're not particularly good. In fact, many of them are embarrassingly bad. And I don't really think anyone would learn anything from seeing them other than like, Jesus, man, you're not joking. These really suck. So I love anything to do with paper, ink, acrylic, oil. I don't know how to use any of that stuff. I just love it. I have a box of acrylic acrylic plants. No, I have acrylic paints in my office, and my wife just walked by and kind of went like this, looking at me and the paint, because she knows I can't use them either. So I do make large prints, but very, very rarely do I make large prints anymore. I don't need large prints. I don't do exhibitions. I have no interest in showing my work in galleries. I have no interest in being in a museum. I have no interest in publicly displaying my work. I just don't care anymore. And let me repeat what I've said many times. I love photography. I love photography as much today as I always have, but it's a very personal, fun thing. I am more than happy to spend multiple years on a project, never show anyone the work, make a single copy of a book that I get in the mail. I look at it and I go, I did well, or wow, I still suck after all these years. And then I put it on the shelf and I go out and I spend another couple years doing another project that no one's going to see. I've been this way my whole life. I'm not saying you should be that way. I can't even really fully explain why I am that way, but that's the way it is. And so I don't make a lot of big prints anymore because I have nowhere to put them. And as you can see, my walls are pretty full. And the only reason there's a painting of mine here, which actually isn't that sucky, believe it or not. And there's one image that was in a show that didn't sell from probably 10 years ago. And that's why it's filling a hole. I just got 2 new paintings from a friend in California. I went to his house and was in his studio, and I was like, wow, I love his work. And then he was like, hey, you should pick 2 of these and take them. And I was like, okay, I will. And so my wife and I were just talking about how we're going to frame those before I started this film. And so I would much rather look at your work than my work. I would much rather help you make a book than make one on my own. I would much rather help you edit and sequence and become a better photographer than me trying to go out and become a better photographer. I just don't care. Did I tell you I bought a motorcycle? That's kind of what I'm interested in now. Oh, and I have a new bicycle as well, which I'm going to do a film about, but I'm not going to tell you what it is yet. It's tiny. That's a hint. Okay, question number 4, if I can find it. I feel mellow today, like this is very slow. But that's okay. Question number 4, and we're at 15 minutes. For me, this is like a soundbite. Okay, question number 4. I find double-page spreads very challenging outside of the, he said flat lay options, but it's lay flat. I get you. I know where you're going. Even when working with only 50 pages, I find that certain detail is lost in the fold, only visible when the spine is broken. Printing landscape and square publications are crutches. Okay, so I don't see printing landscape and square publications as crutches per se. But I think an exercise that would be very, very helpful and beneficial to most people would be to design an 8x10 portrait format with landscape imagery. I think that is a peculiar graphic design problem that to amateurs and consumers and people with design skills like me, which are not strong, that is a formidable obstacle to overcome. But a huge percentage of the books that I have on my shelf present a similar problem to the designers. And I think the vast majority of books on my shelf lose part of an image in the gutter. It's never bothered me. It doesn't bother me today when I see a book, whether it's a sort of lay flat style book or a traditional bound book. It doesn't bother me. I know if the edit's right and the crop's right and the design is right, you shouldn't think about it at all. Now, I've done books where I purposely put the key elements of the images in the gutter on purpose, forcing the viewer to bend the book open, not quite break that spine, but bend it open to see what's in the gutter, which is exactly what I was told never to do in photo school, which is exactly why I did it. And oddly enough, that's been one of my most successful books. So what I'm saying to you is you have to rethink everything you know. This is 2021, and I think we have to think differently. We have to think beyond straight image makers and bookmakers. I'll give you another example. Someone reached out and said, hey, do you have time for a call? I'm putting this book together. I've got some color management issues, and I want to talk to you about color management. And I'm like, no problem. And I sent a link to some color management stuff, and I made some suggestions about monitor calibration and also keeping image density in mind. But what I wanted to say to this person, and I will when I speak to them, is once you have basic color down, your monitor calibrated, keeping your density in mind, because if you're sitting in front of a monitor with the brightness turned all the way up, it's not going to work out so well for you. And most of us are. Even the people who say, oh, I would never do that, most of the time their monitor brightness is all the way up. Your images are going to print dark. That's most likely if you're doing that. So, but what I wanted to say to them was, once you have your basic color calibration established, what you better be thinking about is, do you have a body of great photography? Have you made a great edit? What is your sequence like? And just as important, who is doing the page design? Who's in control of the typography? You better design something. If you're making a book with a single image on a page and some copy on the left-hand side, that's not enough anymore. For the general public is just going to be like, what is this, a portfolio? Like, I don't really care about this stuff. You've got to tell a story. And that story is conveyed not just through the photographs, but through the overall design of the book itself. So page layout, typography, editing, sequencing, those are dialects of the same language, and you have to be fluent in all of them to make a great object. And oh, by the way, I will take great design over great color any day of the week. I'll take great photos over great color, great editing and sequencing over great color. Great color, to me, is the least important thing of the whole process, because the public does not care. The public does not look at a photo book and say, this looks like 10 points cyan. They don't care. They're waiting to be entertained or educated. And if you're not doing either of those, it doesn't matter how good your color is. You're gonna fall flat, man. Okay, number 5. We've got a little photography composition question here. When in the field, do you actively work your composition based around this print decision, leaving a negative space in the center for the fold, or do you find design workarounds afterwards and fit your work to the page rather than the other way around? Anything else that can be considered here would be great. So this is a great question, and it's one I've had literally multiple times every year going back to the time that I started making books and mags, which is in about 1993. I was in the darkroom long before that, but I was making my first real magazine that I was showing to the world I made in 1993. It was not easy at that point. No, maybe 95. Somewhere around there. I don't remember, man. What do you want? Specifics? I got a D in math, which we all know by now. So it's a great question, because the more time you spend making books and magazines, the easier it is to allow that ideology to creep into your practice in the field, because you'll be framing something and in the back of your head, you're like, oh, if I just take a step to the right and I do this, then that picture will be able to, I'll have a nice clear space in the middle. I can run a double truck. But listen to yourself. Listen to that. What you're doing is you're thinking about something else instead of thinking about the composition in front of you. There it is again. I see the exposure like rocket up for no reason. That's probably my death ray that my body puts off. I don't know. So the short answer is yes, I do it. And I try not to do it because it's not smart. Making great photographs, and I'm not talking about crap that people put online and they have a big following and everybody goes, great capture, amazing, blah, blah, blah. And you look at it and you go, this picture sucks and we've seen it 10 million times. And yes, these people don't know what good is. I'm talking about great. Great images are so rare for everyone. I'm talking about the best photographers in the world. When you sit down with them and talk to them, they know the times that they're making something great and they know the times where they're not. And that's the facts of life. That's how it works. So making great photographs is incredibly difficult. And I don't know anyone that's so good that it doesn't take all of their bandwidth to do that. Now, if someone can do it, then the images typically aren't that great. They may be great for their genre or great for their client, but overall they're not great. I've made pictures for clients that I was so embarrassed about that I was like, this is the worst thing ever. And the client was like, this is amazing. This is exactly what we wanted. So you cannot let the clients dictate to you what great is. You cannot let your friends and family tell you what great is. And the last people on earth you want to allow you to tell you what's great is the online audience, especially on something like YouTube, where you've got tens of millions of people around the world who are, yes, amazingly enthusiastic about photography, which is a great thing, but they're not necessarily looking at your work with a critical lens and saying, this is truly great. So that making those is so difficult and so rare that if you're trying to do two things at once and you're framing stuff up saying, I'm going to use this for publication later, I think you're going to be disappointed overall in the quality of that work. I am certainly not good enough to do that, but I do catch myself doing that. And in the field, and I'm like, what are you doing? What are you doing? Stop doing that. Who cares about how you're going to use this later? You'll figure out a way. If your page design skills and your editing skills are good enough, you'll get around this. So don't do what I do. Do what I'm hoping I want to do. Wait a minute. Don't do what I do. Do what I'm trying to get myself to do, which is not think about that. But that's a great question. All right, we're making progress here. Question, you know what we're going to do? We're going to jump here to another question, which is totally unrelated. Jesus, now I can't find it. Alrighty then. This was a question about Lyme disease, and here it is. Okay, this is question number 6. And yes, for those of you who are on this channel for photography and books and all that stuff, you should listen to this anyway. The past 5 weeks, I've spent multiple hours every week dealing with people suffering from Lyme disease all over the world. That means via telephone, via email, via text message, via instant messenger, everything you can think of. I got it on the way home this afternoon. A friend here in town reached out and said, who's your Lyme doc? I need one again. It's back. I've got to deal with this again. This is a global epidemic. If you think you're in the clear from Lyme disease, odds are you're not. These ticks are all over the world now except for the polar caps. So you probably know someone who has it or know someone who's been diagnosed with it at some point. So just bear with me here because I get this all the time. So this person wrote and said, saw your YouTube video on Lyme. I've been fighting it for almost 4 years. My main culprits are exhaustion, brain fog, dizziness, bone pain, and periods of anxiety. I tested positive through Armin Labs and have an LLMD, which is a Lyme literate medical doctor. I plateaued over the last several months, but have been unable to work for almost 4 years. You've tried a lot of stuff, so I was wondering if you could share what helped you on the road to reducing symptoms. Thanks again for taking the time to share your personal story. It provides hope. That is what you should take from me, is that I'm not perfect. I had a little Lyme dip last week, and so not a terrible one, but when it comes on, you know exactly what it is. It's a very, very specific thing, and you just go, oh no, I got to shut down. So that hit me for about 2 days last week, but it had been quite a while since I'd had one of those. I expect to have them the rest of my life. That's just the way it is. So I did some things in the past that I would do again and some things that I would not do again. I took oral antibiotics for 2 years. Let me repeat this for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about with Lyme and how crazy this is. I took 3 antibiotics twice a day for 2 years. 3 antibiotics twice a day, 2 years. Think about that. One of them, by the way, hydroxychloroquine. For all you crazies out there, yes, I took that for 2 years. I wouldn't do that again. I wouldn't take oral antibiotics. I would do IV, and I would put a PICC line in my heart, and I would pulse those IV antibiotics on and off, on and off. I am not a doctor. I'm not a medical person. Obviously, you're going to check with your LLMD before you move forward. These are things that I would do. The second thing is that I did immune drips. I did a vitamin C IV and I did a glutathione IV. And those were very, very helpful for me. And I hit those hard. I would do those 2 or 3 times a week. They were all out of pocket. My insurance did not cover it, so I was paying a lot to do this, but I was desperate and I would do anything I could to try to get beyond this. I did 40 days of hyperbaric oxygen treatment, 40 days in a row at Lyme depth. I would not do that again. I am not a claustrophobic person, but it was everything I could do to hold it together in that container. My body would burst into sweat in a way that I didn't think was even remotely possible. The psychology of being in a tube like that, knowing that if something goes wrong, you can't get out quickly. They have to decompress you from a very, very far, deep depth. And I did not see a huge benefit from that. I do know other people that did it that enjoyed, I can't say enjoyed it, people who thought it was effective. There was a woman next to me in a hyperbaric chamber, and she was someone who had come and done it every year for like 10 years. So power to you, man. There's no way I'm doing that again. The IVs, the first thing I did was also change my diet. No sugar, no dairy, no gluten, no corn, no alcohol. And that is, the diet is something that you can change without anyone else's help. And all of those are inflammatory things. All of those are tricky and difficult for your body to deal with. And that's even for healthy people. So not everyone, but most people, I think, would actually feel better if they cut those things out for the most part. I'm not saying you have to go hardcore, but obviously inflammation is a big deal. I also think CBD was something, good CBD, not crap stuff you buy at the gas station. I'm talking about good CBD. That was incredibly helpful and something that I still use on a daily basis. I took it this morning. I'll take it again tonight. I put it in my smoothies. Very helpful to me. The 20-to-1 CBD paste that I got 5 or 6 years ago, I can no longer find. That was the best thing I ever had. And by the way, I didn't even know what CBD was when I started, my Lyme doctor said, hey, why are you not using this? And I was like, I don't even know what it is. And so I went from 0 to 60 with it, and I love it. I wish I was using it my whole life, because it's really helpful to me. So that, in a nutshell, are some of the things that really helped me with my Lyme stuff. Sleep is another. You've got to get sleep. You've got to eat right. You've got to, infrared sauna. That's another thing. I sat in an infrared sauna every day for years, and I still do. I just moved it, but I have a little portable one that I moved over here because it is one of the ugliest apparatuses you've ever seen. And if I had it behind me here, you would not be looking at the artwork. Every single one of you would be writing in and saying, Milner, what the hell is that in your living room? Is that an art installation, or what is that? It's a cheapy, collapsible, portable infrared sauna. I sit in it at least once a day and just absolutely sweat my face off. And one of the things with Lyme that's tricky, and for those of you who don't know about this, when you're taking that kind of antibiotics, when you're stacking up 3 antibiotics or you're taking IV antibiotics, the Lyme is dying off in your body. At least some of the Lyme is dying off. And so you're sick from the antibiotics. You're sick from what's called herxing, or the Herxheimer response, which is your body's reaction to bacteria dying inside of you. And you're sick from the Lyme. And one of the frustrating things is sometimes when you get treatment for Lyme, you actually get worse because of the herxing. So you don't know often, why am I sick today? Why do I feel so horrible today? Is it the herxing? Is it the antibiotics? Or is it the Lyme? Or is it a combination of everything? And it's incredibly frustrating, especially when it goes on for years and years and years at a time. So you have to stay mentally strong to get over this. The days of hearing people say chronic Lyme is imaginary, this is BS. Most of the mainstream medical organizations in America are lying about Lyme, and they have since 1975. You also have a lot of the main media organizations that are lying about Lyme. You have the outdoor industry lying about Lyme. This has been going on for 1975. All of this information is out there. The deeper you dive into it, the crazier it gets. Yeah, you even mention it to people, and you start to be that guy at the party that everyone's like, I'll be over here, and they abandon you, and then you're in the corner by yourself just putting out the vibe. Question number 7. So this is going back to the first question, which was about someone, it's very similar. I should have addressed this at first, but hey, whatever, it's me. I can do whatever I want. Question number 7. I think I heard you mention a few films going into the field with only a camera and an audio recorder. Could you talk a little bit about the utility of the audio recorder for a project? And most importantly, how do you broach the topic of recording people? So recording is a little bit like photography. Photography is visually recording someone, and using an audio recorder is auditory recording of that same person. Most of the time I'm recording ambient sound. I'm not necessarily that interested in recording people's voices, although I do have that. I recorded an auctioneer in southern New Mexico a few years ago, and I love that clip. Most of the time it's ambient sound. And what I would love to do eventually is to make music with that ambient sound. I think that would be really fun and a skill that I don't have. But to me, still photography is awesome by itself. But it takes on this weird other dimension when there's sound involved. And I don't know about you, but when you add motion and sound and stills, I get distracted at times. If it's something I absolutely love, yes, I'll pay attention. But if it's not, I often find myself a little bit distracted. But with audio and stills only, I feel like oftentimes I'll close my eyes, and the first thing I do is I listen to the sound. I get as intimate with the sound as I possibly can, and then I open my eyes and I take in those photographs, and it makes the connection even tighter. So that's how I feel about it. So the audio recorder, actually, it's what I do the least in the field, and it's what I would like to do the most. It's a weird thing. I was just digging through my bag of equipment. I say bag of equipment. I have all the bags. I have Atlas, I have Shimoda, I have Tenba, all those. But I also have a big plastic bin that's just filled with loose gear. I know that sounds horrible, and it is horrible, and it's terrible, but it actually works really well when you're like randomly looking around for stuff. And I saw my audio recorder earlier today, and I was like, God, I just want to go out, and I just want to drive around and walk around and ride just with the audio recorder because it's so endless. And Zoom a few years ago did this YouTube film, or it was a marketing film for the H6 recorder, and I think it was done in Europe with a kid who was a music, like not techno, but like ambient house, whatever you want to call it, deep dark Danish dub, whatever you want to call it. And he took the Zoom H6 around and he recorded all these different sounds and then turned them into music. And it was just such a cool thing. And I'm like, that's what I want to do. So that's how I use it. Okay, we're at question 8, and I'm going to end it there because this is just ridiculously long. Okay, last question, number 8. Is that what I said? One question for the black and white man in the van. That would be me. Do you think people today are still skilled enough to read black and white photography? Hypothesis. Black and white photos have to be looked at and read in a different way than color photographs. Was the general public before the color film of the 1980s more able to read black and white photographs? Is that view on the photography world lost forever? That is a very good question. So I think I told this story before, but when I was a newspaper photographer in the early 90s, we were obviously shooting transparency for everything, color transparency. But in the field, the number one question I got was, what channel are you with? That was always the strangest damn thing. Like, I got still cameras. What do you mean, what channel? That happened all the time. The second most frequent question was, why are you not using black and white? We miss black and white. Why are you shooting color? And that was management at newspapers determining, in their infinite wisdom, that the general public was too sophisticated for black and white and demanded color. That was completely and utterly ignorant and a lie, and was never the case. They had budgets. They needed to spend money, and they needed to spend those budgets because they weren't going to get that budget again if they didn't spend it. It's like road crews patching up our highways. You don't spend that money, don't ask for it next year. So I do think the public was more attuned to looking at black and white. So in that way, I do think that there was a sophistication level with their engagement with black and white because it was the common methodology. The switch to color demanded them to change, demanded them to look at things in a different way. And so black and white to me is about form and shape and shadow, and color is about temperature and direction and color. And so they can both ride on those without an image actually being a particularly good or solid image. And you can carry it with those ingredients just based on how that medium is devised and how it works. So I don't think it's lost forever. I mean, I still see amazing black and white photographic essays, and I think that the general public will engage with those if they're good, and you have a good story to tell, and you present it in the right way. They will absolutely engage with black and white. I don't think that that's a problem at all. So my advice to you is to give it a whirl. Do a project, do one in color, one in black and white, make 2 books, toss them out, and then do one of those little counting things where you go 1, 2, 3, 4 /5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then every time you leave them out, and when someone engages with one more than the other, You do a little count for fun, and then you do another book about your study and your process of doing that. I think that's a banner idea. So that's it for this Q&A. I appreciate you sending the questions in, and I am one person with one opinion, so take it for what it's worth. Although, let me say something. I am just one person with one opinion, but I did just have someone hit on me in the grocery store. A woman came up and said if she was younger, she'd give me her number. So I'm still a bit traumatized from that, but it just happened, so I can't deny it, and that's all I have to say.
Let's see it.